You ever wake up and realize the wildest thing in your life isn't out there in the forest, but right next door, clutching a clipboard? Yeah, that happened. My name's Elijah Brody, 62 years old, and even though I'm retired from the Forest Service, my internal clock's still set for 5 a.m. Sharp, no matter how many times I try to sleep in. For 18 years, it's just been me on this sloped acre brushing up against Pine Hollow Ridge, and honestly, that's the way I like it. It's quiet, mostly. Just the kind of silence you get when the nearest neighbor used to be a family of mule deer and the wind carried more stories than the town newsletter ever could. Now, this cabin isn't some showpiece. Sarah and I built it ourselves before cancer took her back in '07. It's more than a house. It's a memory, every floorboard and cedar beam holding echoes of laughter and late-night talks, and yeah, even arguments over whether to stain the porch or let it gray natural. If you've ever lost someone and still feel them on a summer breeze, well, you get it. I swear I see her in the way morning light flickers across the porch, or hear her voice in the creak of a rocking chair. Maybe that's why I've always felt a little overprotective about this place. Some people look at a fence and just see wire and posts. But to me, that line out back is a handshake deal between me and whatever's waiting in the trees, nature, history, whatever you want to call it. I built that barrier from rough cedar, sunk steel pipe deep to outlast the floods, tensioned every strand of wire like it mattered, because it did. Feral hogs up here aren't cartoon pigs. They're mean, armored, tusked monsters that can turn a hillside to mud in one night. I saw one break a deck railing, blood everywhere, just going after a fawn hiding beneath the boards. After that, I didn't just fix the fence. I fortified the whole edge, and for 16 years, nothing got through. Downhill neighbors would thank me, especially after a boar charged their dogs and nearly flipped their trash cans down to the county road. But then came the real predators, the HOA. I should have known trouble was coming the second I saw their convoy of pressed polos and sunvisor SUVs. They called themselves the Pine Hollow Beautification Board, like banning flagpoles and picking out mailbox colors made them the guardians of civilization. Joke's on me, I guess. I wasn't even in the HOA when I bought this land. Subdivision crept in later. Developers squeezed 16 houses in next door, and suddenly my little patch was non-compliant. It started small. Letters about my mailbox. Complaints about my agricultural structure. That's my old tool shed, thank you very much. Then they came for the barrier. Spring brought the first golden-lettered warning. All bureaucratic perfume and no substance. Dear Mr. Brody, the structure on your eastern property line is in violation of Section 12C, 2 pages about aesthetic consistency, 0 about safety. They wanted it down. I called, left a message, never heard back. Next week, a final warning showed up with a $500 fine attached if I didn't remove the fence in 30 days. Now, let me tell you something about us old Forest Service types. We don't bluff, and we sure don't forget. I mailed back 3 pages, single-spaced, citing state and county wildlife codes, boar migration maps, photos of torn-up yards. Thought maybe they'd see reason. I was wrong. They weren't after a conversation. They wanted submission. By midsummer, cars rolled by more often, khakis, cameras, notepads. One guy snapped my picture while I was weeding tomatoes. I waved. He didn't. 2 days later, another letter. HOA hearing scheduled. Your presence requested. I declined. Not pride, principle. I'd already said my piece. Next morning, I was jolted awake by metal on metal. Sun barely up, and there's a backhoe chewing at my fence line, 3 guys in orange vests ripping posts like weeds. I threw on boots, stomped down in pajamas. You're trespassing. I shouted. They shrugged. HOA president gave the work order. No sheriff, no legal notice, just a printout and entitlement. By noon, the whole barrier was gone. You ever get that feeling something's watching you? I swear the boars were in the tree line, waiting. Sure enough, by Wednesday, Facebook lit up. Something dug up my petunias. Is this a wild pig in my yard? Photos started rolling in. Trash cans overturned, claw marks on siding, a dog limping with a gashed leg. Instead of admitting their mistake, the HOA doubled down. Monday, they dropped a letter in my mailbox. No gold this time, just panic. You have a responsibility to the community. Submit a plan of action within 72 hours or face escalating fines. I laughed, couldn't help it. They tore down my barrier, then tried to blame me for the pigs waltzing through. That night, I drafted my response, attached time-stamped photos, a property deed, wildlife service reports, even CC'd the local news. By morning, my inbox was blowing up. Even got a note from Karen, wildlife officer. They're poking the wrong bear, Eli. But the HOA pressed on, called a mandatory meeting. Flyers everywhere, community safety concern. I'd never spoken at an HOA meeting, but that night I showed up in my cleanest shirt, forestry badge in my pocket. The clubhouse was packed, kids, retirees, even cops at the door. Janice Mallory, the HOA president, started with a slideshow, damaged yards, upturned bikes. This crisis started with one man's refusal to follow guidelines. All eyes turned to me. I waited for her to finish, then set my folder on the podium. Here's a photo, 3 days before you took down my barrier, a sounder of boars at the tree line. Here's the day after, one in the Pattersons' backyard, right where their toddler plays. Dead silence. I stared right at Janice. This isn't about non-compliance. It's about negligence. The crowd shifted. Then an older guy piped up. So what are you going to do about it, Mr. Brody? I nodded. I'm going to make sure they can't do it to anyone else. That was the turning point. Next morning, my phone wouldn't stop. Texts from neighbors, some mad, most grateful. One stood out. Carlos Ramirez, used to be a city attorney, lives up the hill. Saw what happened last night. If you want to talk strategy, I'm around. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about my fence. It was about precedent. Carlos and I met that afternoon. Him with a stack of files, me with coffee. They authorized destruction on titled property without a court order, he said. That's trespassing, Elijah. And more if you want it. So we built our case. Photos, letters, wildlife reports, even a memo from Karen stating that removing the barrier endangered public safety. Then we found the real twist, a clause in the bylaws. Any property not originally in the HOA's plan needs a majority homeowner vote to come under HOA control. No vote ever happened on my land. We filed a cease and desist, then a civil suit, unlawful destruction, trespass, negligence. I spoke at the preliminary hearing, told the judge about Sarah, the boar attacks, 16 years of peace, and how one unchecked board turned our homes into a wildlife corridor. The judge barred the HOA from further action pending review. Neighbors started changing. Mrs. Lambert, who once reported me for too many tomato plants, brought pie and an apology. Troy, a guy I barely knew, said, I don't like fences, but I like justice. Folks started talking, swapping stories about arbitrary fines, flagpoles, porch chairs, mulch colors. Turns out, plenty had been pushed around, but nobody pushed back. Now they were. Of course, Janice called a board meeting, sent out a newsletter, accused me of stirring unrest, seeking attention. Irony was so thick you could cut it. Then, out of nowhere, a manila envelope landed on my porch. Screenshots of board emails, Janice worrying they'd lose the east boundary if they didn't act. Proof they were after power, not safety. That's when the HOA came back, with a bulldozer, work order in hand, ready to mow down the edge of my land, even after the injunction. Janice herself stepped out, tennis white spotless, clipboard at the ready. We're just implementing vegetation control, she said, all honey and daggers. I held up the court order. You so much as scratch my dirt, you're complicit. Contractor hesitated. Janice pressed, but before it could escalate, Deputy Nolan showed up, county sheriff, broad-shouldered, no nonsense. You're violating a judicial order. Leave now. And they did, shamed and silent. I posted the video. It went viral in the neighborhood. Flyers went out, not from the HOA but from the residents. Enough is enough. Community forum tonight. 70 households showed up. Someone called for a recall vote. We needed 25%. Got more than half in 2 hours. Turns out, the HOA had fired the first shot, but they'd woken up a neighborhood that wasn't going back to sleep. 2 nights later, wild hogs tore through Pine Hollow again, cars damaged, lawns wrecked, folks frightened. The chaos made the news. Karen and her team set up trail cams, bait traps, issued an advisory. Removal of barriers has disrupted migratory behavior. Avoid unnecessary outdoor activity. Didn't need to name the HOA, everyone knew. At the next town hall, Janice tried to spin it, but the crowd wasn't having it. My 5-year-old found blood on his swing set, a young mother said. You told us it was about beauty. I warned you months ago, mister. Ellis added. The crowd demanded the recall, Saturday, for PM, ballot-style, transparent. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about survival. Saturday felt like revolution. Volunteers ran the vote, sheriff's deputy on hand. When it was done, Sandra Lee, accountant and mother of 3, read the results. 60% for recall, board dissolved effective immediately. The room erupted, not chaos but catharsis. It wasn't my win. It was ours. The new barrier went up, this time built by everyone. Kids, teens, retirees. Even Mrs. Lambert hammered a nail. The forest felt quieter after, the community louder. Janice tried to run, but ended up subpoenaed for misuse of funds. Turns out, the board's books were shadier than a pine grove at noon. A month later, I got a note, no name, just a piece of broken cedar post and the words, "I was wrong. May your next boundary never be crossed." I didn't need her apology, but I took it as proof. Sometimes the loudest voices can soften. The county judge ruled in my favor, full restitution, legal fees, ecological repairs, and referred the board for criminal charges. When I stepped outside that courthouse, neighbors clapped my back, not because I won, but because we stood together. Pine Hollow changed. The clubhouse became a community center, free classes, shared gardens. Even the old flagpole went back up, stars and stripes waving over people who'd learned, finally, that the rules mean nothing if they don't serve those who live beneath them. Every morning, I still walk the line. Sometimes Troy joins me, or Emma with her chalk, or Nolan off duty. We don't always talk. Sometimes the silence is enough. That's where healing happens. We built a bench in the park with the last of the recall donations. The inscription reads, "For those who stand when others would sit." That night, at the potluck, Carlos handed me a newspaper. "Small town overthrows HOA, rebuilds stronger." I laughed. I never wanted fame, just peace. When folks ask what changed Pine Hollow, it wasn't just a lawsuit or a rebuilt barrier. It was a bunch of stubborn neighbors finally remembering how to listen, to fight, to protect, not with anger, but with truth. So here's my question. What's a community worth to you? Is it order, rules, a perfect lawn? Or is it looking out for the person next door, even when it's easier to look away? Let me know down in the comments. What would you have done? Where do you draw your own line? And hey, if you ever find yourself up against a bully with a clipboard, don't back down. Stand your ground, find your people, and remember, it's not just about the barrier. It's about the hands that build it together.